Draft season is here, baby. Post combine, and to break all things, talk all things NFL draft. We are joined by our guy Dom C of Talking Jets and Project Prospect. A lot to get into regarding the draft. We'll cover that and much more, all coming up here on a Friday edition of NY Flight Jets Talk.
Jets, Jets, let's go.
Jets wide receiver Wesley Walker. Wesley, how you doing today?
ESPN writer, Mr. Rich Samini, Jets reporter for The Athletic, Mr. Zach Rosenblatt, Hall of Famer, and Jets legend, Mr. Marty Lyon.
Your host, Connor Law.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back here into another edition of NY Flight Jets Talk on this Friday, March 7th, 2025. Can't thank you guys enough for tuning in. Make sure you smash the like button and you are subscribed to the channel on your way into the building. It's completely free and it helps us grow significantly here on the show. The paid way helps support the show. That helps us grow just as much. We'll throw the ticker on down below, contributing to our membership raffle. Every membership gifted will get you a ticket into our raffle, a Wayne Corbett signed jersey, a Darrelle Revis signed photo, an Al Toon signed photo, a Keyshawn Johnson signed photo, a Jericho Cotchery signed photo, a free item from our merch store, channel emoji. Among the prizes we're giving away this month, so make sure you get in on that. If you haven't already, every super chat or every $2.99 or every $2.99 super chat or every gifted membership will get you a ticket into our raffle. But joining us right now, one of the best draft guys you will find on the internet, covers the New York Jets for Talking Jets and his own channel, Project Prospect. It's our guy, Dom C, who is kind enough to spare some time and join us here on the program. Dom, how you doing?
I'm well, Connor. How are you, man? Thanks for having me on again.
Of course, it is great you are. I'm super happy you are able to be here. Doing well, and I guess where I'm going to start is, obviously, Dom, you do a lot of prep on all these prospects before the Combine. You're obviously down in Mobile, Alabama for the Senior Bowl the past few years. You get to witness these guys firsthand. Now we're looking post-Combine, all the drills, all the measurables in the books. Is there any prospect who, you significantly changed your stance on them after the Combine or overall, the measurable stuff like that? You not put too much stock into it?
Well, listen, everyone's going to tell you, everyone might do it a little different. I'll tell you how I kind of approach it, Connor, is I don't change grade. My grades are done through film study and really that analysis. Now, what I may do is if somebody, if like the juice, like the apples, I'm getting apples and oranges where I'm seeing somebody who's not really athletic on film, or at least that's what my scouting report and my notes say, and then they go and test out like freaks at the Combine or vice versa. I might go back and watch them, but I don't change my grades. I might adjust guys, up and down the board. Like, if I have a tier of guys, and there's 5 guys in a tier and the bottom guy just blows the roof off the Combine, and I go back and I see some of that stuff on film, maybe I'll bump them up a little bit. But no one's really the grades aren't changing, and the grades are what they grade. The film is really, for me, the key component of how I decipher or make my own assessments.
Now, Dom, Shamar Stewart is someone who Jordan Reed mocked the New York Jets in his latest mock draft. And just talk about overall an athletic freak, someone who had insane measurables at the Combine, pretty much aligned with Myles Garrett when it comes to the measurables. The one thing that didn't align with Myles Garrett from his collegiate career was the overall production. Obviously, Shamar Stewart, around 4.5 sacks in college. He's yet to unlock that production, yet he has all the physical traits. Dom, where are you on Stewart, and do you think he could be in play at 7?
Stewart's my 15th player in the class. And, again, we talk about a tier, right? He might have been, before the Combine, he might have been, 17 or 18 around there. I definitely think I adjusted him up. One of the few that I adjusted up a little bit in that tier. Listen, I think you saw what we saw, right? We saw a guy at, 265 pounds, just dog walk through these athletic testing results, and it's funny that you bring up the traits versus the production kind of argument, because that's going to go hand in hand with Shamar Stewart as long as this draft process is going on. I'll tell you this, I think that the traits are something that the NFL teams are going to really look at more so than the production, and because there's factors to it. Connor, there's the fact of the defense that he played in, both him and Nick Scorton, who's the other end, were given a lot more gap responsibility and contain responsibility, and during the run. So they weren't just constantly penetrate and constantly trying to go vertical or north and south and get at the quarterback. So sure, there's situations where it's third down and Stewart's in wide 9 and he's asked to go get the quarterback and he wins some of those reps and he doesn't win some of those reps. But I think people who are just looking at one number are really missing the big picture of Shamar Stewart, because he's a disruptor. He's in the backfield. He's chasing down plays from the backside, from the left to the right, or the right from the left. The guy's violent. He's big, strong, plays with really, really strong hands. Violent. I think he's an adequate, above adequate, run defender right now. With an athletic toolbox that's through the roof. If he can hone in on his pass rush plan and really grow into that athleticism, I think you're looking at a guy who can easily record double-digit sacks relatively easy. I'm not calling for it next week, but that you're hoping that your team and your coaches can kind of project that over the next 2 to 3 years, similar to when the Jaguars took Trayvon Walker first overall. Trayvon Walker didn't have a lot of big production numbers at Georgia, right? But they saw a vision of what he could become. And I think that's what a lot of teams are going to do with Shamar Stewart. Remember, he'll only be 20 years old on draft night. He won't turn 21 until a month into the season. So he's still young. He's still developing, and he's got a ceiling that's like way high. Is he in play for the Jets? I mean, hard to say right now without free agency, but I think I think you can take a handful of 4 or 5 guys and say that it's fair enough to consider them in play.
Now, Dom, many draft analysts have gone out. They've said they consider this draft a very top-heavy draft, unlike last year where there was depth everywhere. Last year, pretty much every position was very, very stacked overall. Many say now it's top-heavy with the Abdul Carters, the Travis Hunters, the Cam Wards, obviously tending to fall in the top 3. In my opinion, after watching a lot of these guys and looking at the numbers, I kind of feel it's more so the opposite. I think the late first round, the early second round, at least in my opinion, is where the best overall value is in this year's draft. Like, for example, a Kenneth Grant, who's now risen up draft boards, but he's probably going to go in that 15 to 20 range, potentially. Mm-hmm. A Tyleek Williams, the huge interior defensive lineman from Ohio State, I really like at the top of the second round. Jack Besh, the wide receiver out of TCU. So many guys I like in the end of the Colston Loveland, another one, the tight end out of Michigan. Yeah. So many guys that I think are really, really solid in the end of the first round, early second round, and overall, a lot of really, really deep position rooms. Obviously, you scouted all these guys, watching them from the beginning of the season to even doing some summer scouting now, where we're just a little over a month away from the NFL draft. Is there any position group that really sticks out to you and you say, wow, that's a really, really deep room?
Yeah. Well, first off, I agree with your sentiment. I don't think this is a top heavy draft at all. I think the value to this, and I think it'll be that kind of statement will be proven come draft day, because I think there's going to be a lot of teams that have similar grades or similar tiers on players from anywhere from pick 15 to 20 to pick 75. Right. So as as you go through and you look at these mocks and people do mocks and so on and so forth, kind of the names that you're always hearing in the, in the beginning of the first round, in the mid first round, in the bottom first round. Well, don't be surprised if guys that you've consistently heard over the past few weeks and months, second rounders and third rounders, if they go in the first round, because the team might have, a similar grade or similar tier on a guy like that. Isaiah Thomas, the cornerback from FSU, it's a perfect example. If you follow, what everyone says in the mock draft simulators, you can probably land him somewhere late in the second, early in third. I think that, he's as easy to go in the first round as he is in the third round. People are just going to, the boards are going to be a lot different than what we're expecting. So based on positional groups, I think that this is a probably the sickest, most deep running back class that I've ever scouted, for sure. You're going to have guys that are drafted in rounds, 4 and 5 that are contributors and good contributors in the NFL pretty early. The tight end group is also pretty deep. I think there's, a good 6 to 7 starting caliber tight ends that could come out of this class, which is not of the norm, and probably another 3 or 4 that can be good rotational pieces. Maybe they start out and start out as 10 and 2s and develop into something over the length of their first contract. And the defensive line is pretty good too. I think there's although Abdul Carter's at the top of the edge group, in my eyes, by a healthy margin, I think the real value of that group really lands in rounds 2 and 3, where you're going to be able to get some guys that contribute right off the jump. Really, really good talent.
For sure. And you mentioned the running back class there. It's a really, really interesting running back class. Someone who I have really, really high on my board, he's high on a lot of people's boards, but I don't think he's, consistently hitting that RB2, RB3 range on a lot of boards. And for me, that's Quinshon Judkins from Ohio State. I am super, super high on him overall as a prospect. 6 foot, 219 pounds, super difficult to bring down. He has that, burst and acceleration that you really, really want to see in a 6 foot back. Can catch passes out of the backfield, that compact frame. So I'm really, really high on Quinshon Judkins. But I mean, Dom, Ashton Genty, it's hard to watch him and not get giddy when you're watching some Ashton Genty tape. Like, he is so electrifying. 5'9", 215 pounds. Yeah. Super hard to bring down. That small 5'9" compact frame at 215 pounds. If the Jets are looking to trade Breece Hall, which I've been on the record saying, I think if you can get a 3 and a 5 for Breece Hall in this year's draft, and you can maybe draft a Quinshon Judkins with that 3rd round pick, for me, you do it. I just don't think Breece Hall is getting a second contract with this team. I really like Breece. I think he's a great player. Have his jersey again. I just get a 3 and a 5 for him. Someone I don't think is going to be on this team next year. I would do it personally. Let's say the Jets trade Breece, Dom. Do you think there's any shot they take Ashton Genty at pick 7?
I mean, listen, it's there hasn't been many running backs that come out, as not only as good, but as pro ready as Ashton Genty this year. I mean, the only 2 that come to mind are Bijan Robinson and Saquon Barkley, right? Mm-hmm. And they've stepped in and, were, instant borderline elite players at the position. And I think it's suffice to say, those guys are top 5 in their positional groups, relatively. Listen, do I think they take Ashton Genty? I don't know, man. I'll say this. I'll go on record with this with you, Connor. Breece Hall's my favorite Jet. My favorite current New York Jet. Breece Hall by far is my favorite one. I probably agree with you that I don't know if he's long for a second contract, but I'm also of the belief that I don't know if you trade him, because for a team right now that has a new sheriff in town, new regime. B is going to have to set some sort of identity, and 3, most importantly, probably has holes up and down the roster, not only at starting positions, but in depth positions. I don't know if you trade a 24-year-old back just to put another hole in there. So I think that trading Breece Hall, on paper, I understand what you're saying, but to me, I'd probably more or less just, go into the season, see if he can, what kind of workload that Tanner Engstrom and AG want to, kind of give him. And, at worst, you run the brakes right off of him. And if you don't re-sign him and he signs somewhere else, then, you're looking at probably a healthy comp pick. If that's the case, or maybe you decide that, he's good enough and he's going to fit in what we want to do in this offensive scheme, and you give him a short-term deal or something like that. So I think there's a lot of options. I probably wouldn't take Ashton Genty at 7 with Breece Hall on the roster. And it'd probably be, I think it would be a good conversation if he wasn't on the roster, but the fail safes, the backup plans are still really good. Like I said, it's as deep of a class as that I've seen in a while. You mentioned Quinshon Judkins. I happen to like his counterpart Trevion Henderson a whole bunch. Amarian Hampton, Devin Neal, Caleb Johnson,
Dylan Sampson.
DJ Giddens. I mean, there's guys that are going to be real players in the league. So.
Yeah, for sure. That's the one problem, Dom. When I was thinking it through the other day, potentially trying to trade Breece Hall and then drafting Ashton Genty, that's the one thing I kept running into. You're creating an extra hole and then trying to fill it with Ashton Genty. Like we rewind to last year, the Jets stance. Everything was on the table because that roster was so well built. Entering the season on paper, one of, if not probably the best, in my opinion, roster in all of football on paper, the way that team looked entering the draft. So the Jets, for example, had the luxury of taking Olu Fashanu as a depth piece to start the season, backing up Tyron Smith. Ultimately, had to step in to the starting role, but they had that option rather trying to go ahead and, doing everything to trade up for Malik Neighbors or Romo Dunze, drafting Brock Bowers at pick 10. Obviously, they traded back to pick 11 on draft night, but some in that range. This year, I don't think the Jets have that option. I think whoever you draft at 7 needs to come in and be a starter right away, just because how many overall holes there are on the roster. So that's the one problem I kept running into when I was looking at Ashton Genty. Dom, Jackson Dart, the Dart dude movement. It's in full swing here, and there are a lot of Dart dudes after the Senior Bowl, after he looked good throwing in underwear at the combine. I'm not the biggest Dart dude. I'm going to call it how it is. I don't like the way he plays when pressure bears down on him in the pocket. I don't like the way, for example, Lane Kiffin, he provides quarterback isolated friendly reads. That is a college level scheme that a lot of quarterbacks have had struggle, coming in and having success right away with that scheme at the NFL level. Jackson Dart strikes me as someone, you draft him at pick 7, he's going to have to sit for a full year to pretty much relearn what it's like to play offense at a whole nother level, compared to a Will Howard from Ohio State, who I think Jackson Dart has a higher ceiling than Will Howard, but I like Will Howard in rounds 3 or 4 just because I think he has a high floor. Will Howard and Kyle McCord, it's a weak quarterback class, but among all the quarterbacks this year, Will Howard and Kyle McCord are my two guys I like on day 2, day 3. So Jackson Dart, certainly not at pick 7 for me, and I'm not touching him on the first 2 days if I'm Darren Boucher.
Yeah, listen, I mean, I like Jackson Dart. And I'll say this, I agree with your sentiment is that, he's definitely going to have to sit. I mean, there's mechanical issues, especially with his footwork, and his arm angles and stuff like that are going to need to be kind of retooled or revamped, so that he can really step into the ball and off of proper base and with everything kind of in sync from his toes to his knees to his hips to his waist and shoulder. He's got really, really good arm talent. And he's doing that just on the strength of his literally of his arm. If he can really step in and drive the ball, like you're probably looking at arguably one of the best arms probably in the league. Coming in the draft class, I should say, not in the league, but I like the player. I agree that I'm not ready to turn my keys over to him. But I think that of every single quarterback in this class, there's not one guy at the top, and I happen to be Shedeur Sanders is at the top of the class for me. I think that from Shedeur to Cam to Jalen Milroe to Jackson Dart to Will Howard, where I had that's the how I have the top 5 graded. I don't think any of them are ready to play now. Could there be a situation similar to what Drake May went through, where you kind of have that bridge for the first half of the year before you turn the keys over to some of them? Yeah, I think if you take a guy number 1, number 2, number 3 overall, that's usually the plan. But to me, I don't think it would be the most successful of ideas or plans this year. I just think, like you said, a little bit more down of a quarterback year, or maybe it's just a little bit more average. And last year was a real big anomaly, where you get 6 guys in the first round, 5 of which end up being starters at some point in the year, and pretty, and 4 of them at least very impressive nonetheless. So, and you tack in JJ McCarthy, who probably would have been handed the keys over from Sam Darnold at some point during the season, I'm assuming, because I think he's a real talented player himself. So, yeah, listen, in an ideal situation, if the Jets want to target Jackson Dart, I'm not doing it at 7. I'm doing everything in my power. If it's, if it all comes across or comes possible, even if it's a matter of a couple moves, to kind of backtrack, gain some more capital in day 2 or day 3. And then if you want to pull the trigger, mid-late first round, if that's the guy that you're settled on, that's fine. I'd have no problem with that. I might not be too happy if it happens at 7, although, the quarterback room looks, rather bleak right now. You have you have at least a 1-year bridge quarterback in Tyrod Taylor, who has some injury issues himself. So there has to be a plan for post Tyrod if he ends up being, the guy who you hand the keys over to start the season.
Now, Dom, the wide receiver room, the Jets are obviously going to need to revamp their entire wide receiver core pretty much. Davante Adams was announced the other day that the Jets are officially going to cut him, and then Allen Lazard, the Jets are obviously pretty much going to move on from him. It's just a matter of time now. When will the Jets officially move on from Lazard? So that leaves the Jets wide receiver room with Garrett Wilson, Malachi Corley, Xavier Gibson. In my eyes, from what they've shown throughout their NFL career, Garrett Wilson's the only rosterable one among those names in my eyes. That leaves you with one legit wide receiver. And Garrett Wilson's a very, very talented wide receiver, but you still need to beef up that core. And I think this is a really, really solid wide receiver draft class to do so. Yeah, I said I think you need to add 3 wide receivers in total this offseason. The way I would do it is I think you sign one in free agency, like a Josh Palmer, a Tim Patrick, someone of that nature. I think besides now DK Metcalf, who's on the trading block, and obviously Davante Adams, who Jets have moved on from him, every one of those wide receivers is pretty much in that same tier. There are just some who are going to cost more than others. Like,
sure,
Keenan Allen is probably going to command around $11 million for a wide receiver next season. And is he really that much different? Like a $10 million difference between him and Josh Palmer and him and Tim Patrick? I don't think so in my eyes. So I think all those guys are pretty much bunched in the same tier. But when it comes to the wide receiver draft class, I mean, you're talking about Ted McMillan, Emeka Ibuka, Luther Burden at the top. Those are the first round guys pretty much. And then you have so much depth. And then you even look at a guy like Nick Nash from San Jose State, who you could probably get on day 3, who was super, super productive, and his numbers were insane. I mean, playing at San Jose State, still, what he did, though, was remarkable, and he had a great season overall as a receiver. Any wide receivers you really, really like in this year's class? I know you were pretty vocal on Ted not running at the combine, and then him most likely not running at his pro day. What does your board look like from the top there? Who's at one? Is it Ted, Ibuka, or Burden?
I have two first round grades in the wide receiver class, and that's Ted McMillan, who's although I didn't like I said, like you kind of made mention to, I didn't like the fact that he was already bowing out. Not at the combine. There was a ton of people that didn't test at the combine. That's for a whole nother topic and a whole nother discussion. But that he's already saying no. I'm not going to run anything. So to me, that's a little bit of like, listen, here's the reality. Ted McMillan was never going to push Xavier Worthy for in his 40 time, right? You would hope that Ted McMillan comes in anything sub 4, anything at 4.6 or under. And that's a win, because that's the kind of player he is. He's a long strider, a tall guy. He's not, that instant, short area twitchiness and quickness. That's not his game. His game is kind of, meant to be played above the rim. His game is meant to get the ball in his hand and let him, do stuff. He's a, really underrated and a really, really good yards after the catch receiver, with a big frame at 6'5", pushing 215 pounds. He's number 10 on my board, and at number 16, I have Emeka Ibuka, who I think is Emeka Ibuka is a lot closer to wide receiver 1 than wide receiver 3 is closer to Emeka for me. So I just think Emeka Ibuka is a football player, man. He's not the biggest, he's not the fastest. And in the mold of Jack Besh, very similar too. Again, Jack Besh isn't gonna light any stopwatches up with his 40 time, but these guys are high IQ players. They understand how to get open. The way Emeka Ibuka, I think he's the best route runner in the class, and the way he breaks off at the top of his stem and sets defenders up using his shoulders and his head. Reliable hands. I think he's got inside outside versatility. The way he understands the game and understands defensive concepts, where he can find soft spots and kind of settle and be that security blanket for a quarterback. Comps aren't really my thing, but like I look at Emeka Ibuka and I see Amon-Ra St. Brown, and I'll take that guy 10 out of 10 times.
In Ted, I see T. Higgins with a higher ceiling. That's my Ted comp.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm there with him. I've heard a lot with Ted. Like I've heard Drake London, which is which is good. I think
Drake London, but a better athlete, is what Ryan Wilson from CBS Sports, the draft guy, told me.
I think AJ Green is more Tet McMillan. I think T. Higgins is a lot more physical.
Yeah.
Definitely a better release package T. Higgins has than Tet McMillan. That's one thing that I think is questionable with Tet McMillan. But yeah, those are the two guys. And then after that, like, I have 9 guys that grade out somewhere on day 2. So I got the 2 first rounders and 9 or 10 guys that grade out, whether it's round 2 or 3. Big fan of Jaden Higgins, have always been. Big fan of Jalen Royals, who's a different type of receiver than Jaden Higgins. Jaden Higgins is your prototypical X, big body, big catch radius, can do stuff from the outside. He's going to be a slant and go monster. You put the ball in his hands, he's going to get those big chunk plays. Where Jalen Royals from Utah State battled an injury last year and lost a lot of games to a lower body injury. But the year before was uncoverable. He's more that flanker, that Z receiver, similar to a role like the Jets used in Garrett Wilson, where get the ball in his hands and he's gonna force missed tackles, and he's gonna use his quickness and his agility to really excel. So those are just some guys that I like. You mentioned Jack Besh. I think Jack Besh is like a lunch pail kind of receiver. Like you talk about 50-50 balls with Jack Besh, it's more like 75-25. Like that guy catches everything. Little bit slower, former tight end, can really help you in the flank or in the perimeter at the slot, cracking down and in the run game as well. For as good of a blocker as Alan Lazard was also a converted tight end. And I think that skill set really helped him be one of the better, if not, near the top of the heap in terms of blocking wide receivers. But I think Jack Besh can come in and do have a skill set similar to that in terms of blocking. I just think he understands, again, knows how to get open, uses his body and his leverage really good. He's not going to he might not blow by people, but he knows how to get open, and sometimes that's what you need in a receiver, right? Cooper Kupp, Puka Nacua, those guys aren't blazers, but no. they know how to play the game of football. Yep. They know how to get open, and they're reliable with their hands. That's exactly what Jack Besh is.
Appreciate you all tuning in. Make sure you smash the like button. You are subscribed to the channel. Dom and Connor here with you on a Friday edition of NY Flight Jets Talk. If you guys haven't already, shoot Dom a follow on Twitter at DC_NY Jets. One of the best draft guys you will find on the internet. Give him a follow. Give him a sub on his own channel, Project Prospect. Give him a sub on the Talkin' Jets network. Obviously, Dom, Luther Burden is a name that I've heard a lot about, and I watched him, and I just don't get the Luther Burden hype. Like, I think he's a solid wide receiver. I think he's someone I would be comfortable taking at the top of the second round if you're the Jets and you go defense in round 1, certainly, but definitely not in the first round, and certainly not at pick 7. We're talking 5'11", 208 pounds. The way he's utilized, I'm not a fan of. Like, he's only really aligned in the slot. The slot heavy usage is the way I describe it. Like, yeah. I like a guy like Jaden, who am I thinking? Jalen Noel from Iowa is another one. You can kind of plug and play. You can play in the slot. You can play on the outside. Luther Burden is someone who you're drafting him, and he's that slot guy for you right away. Boom, you're putting him in the slot. He's not able to play on the outside. He had a lot of concentration drops over the season, something I noticed looking at the numbers and watching his tape. And then he struggled a little bit when the opposing defense is pressed up on him. So Luther Burden is not someone I'm super, super intrigued with. But if he's there at 42, I would certainly be open to running that card up to the podium. Offensive tackles this year, Dom. In my eyes, it's a super, super weak tackle class. Kelvin Banks and Will Campbell obviously been getting the attention. I don't even think it's a sure thing that they are going to be, these left tackles of the future. There's talks of those guys potentially even having to transition into the guard position at the next level. I'm not sold on those guys, but someone who somehow, Jet fans have been picking him in a lot of mock drafts and been all on board with him. A player I really don't get. I have him around that Gray Zabel offensive tackle 4, offensive tackle 5 range in this year's draft, and that's Armand Membu. He was down at the Senior Bowl, 6'3", 332-pound tackle. I just don't get the fascination, and you pretty much have 4. You have the right tackle spot you need to fill. Maybe he's the guy you draft if you want to go with a tackle in the first round. He comes in, he effectively replaces Morgan Moses, the Morgan Moses Carter Warren pairing last year, and he's the team's starting right tackle. I don't like that move though. Like I think there are so many so many more game changers you could find. Like I would even prefer potentially even going like I know safety's really really rich in the top 10, but for example like a Malachi Starks,
Mhm.
I would rather run Malachi Starks card up to the podium before Armand Membu, a Colston Loveland if Tyler Warren is not there from Michigan, a Mecca Abuka, all these names I just don't get the tackle love, especially in a weak class. And you're talking about taking someone in the top 10. I don't get it.
Yeah. So I do agree again, and I think you look back at last year, which the tackle class was so robust. I think they had what now 10
Three in the
offensive
top 11,
10,
something
10
like that.
offensive 10 offensive linemen, 7 of which were drafted to play tackle, and made it there. So last year was a little bit of an anomaly. This year the talent is a little bit down. And this is this is just me. I've said it since the summer. I really since the fall. Not a knock on the player because he's my highest rated offensive lineman, but even before all the measurements came in, I thought Will Campbell was a guard. I graded him out. I scouted him and graded him out as an interior lineman. So he's not even on my tackle board. He hasn't been since I started getting into the film late in the summer. He's been in my interior board. Now you talk about Membu. Membu is a guy again, really young. Will be 21, I think, a couple days before the draft. So he's just getting into his body. I think he measured out a lot better than people said, because there was questions on whether he was going to have to move inside, and really there's not many pure tackles in this class. So I think that is a testament to really the level or the depth of or the talent in this class. If you're not sure if they can play tackle in the NFL, they might not be great. Might not be a great class. But Membu, man, what he can do, in with a short, compact body, 6'4", measured in, he's got the sand in his pants, in the 320s, in the 330s, but he can move, man. He is, he's got power. He's got really, really strong, powerful punch. Good grip strength. He can latch on in the run block, as a run blocker, and really just kind of displace defensive linemen. But for him, it's just that first step quickness and that elite athleticism that really can't be matched of all the offensive linemen. I'm of the belief that I don't necessarily know if I want to take another lineman in the top 15. At some point, you're going to have to grab a guy and develop him into a starter. Most good NFL teams don't have, premium capital spent up and down the offensive line. They might have a few, and the Jets already have, a top 15 player at left tackle and at right guard, and a top 50 player at center.
Exactly.
So at some point you're going to have to be able to develop some of these guys, but yeah, Membu's, tested out ridiculously good. I'm not surprised because his film is just littered with the elite athleticism. But you match up that athleticism and play strength. I think he's an ideal fit for a team that wants to run, like a zone concept blocking scheme where you can get him out in space and just let him maul. It's still some technical stuff that I think you'd like to clean up, like, with his targets on his punch when he's in his kick step, when he's in pass protection. His footwork's a little narrow, it's a little sloppy for my liking, but he makes up for it because he's a step ahead of everyone because he's just so damn quick and explosive out of his stance, and but with that and so strong that he gets away with poor hand placement at times.
Dom, I'm gonna rewind to something you mentioned earlier on in the show. Shedeur Sanders, you said, is your number one quarterback in this year's class. And now there's been many, like for example, Matt Miller of ESPN, Mel Kiper of ESPN, both think Shedeur Sanders would be a great fit for the New York Jets. They've both mocked Shedeur Sanders to the Jets. And then others have said, the luggage that's gonna come with him, Deion Sanders, all this, all that.
Yeah.
He is not worth the pick if he somehow falls to 7. I don't think he falls to 7, Dom, but if he's on the board as the Jets are on the clock, I'm going to give you a few options. I'm going to put you on the spot here. So he's on the board at pick 7. What do the Jets do? Do they take him? So number one option, take him. Another option is you could, look at the rest of the board. So assume like a Tyler Warren probably Ted McMillan is there. You look at one of those guys, one of the game-changing playmakers, or do you try to trade back and get a haul if a team's willing to come up for Sanders? What do you do there?
Well, obviously it would matter what happens in free agency, right? Like, are we going into camp with Tyrod Taylor and like a $2 million Gardner Minshew, or did we sign Justin Fields? So obviously there's some context that has to be laid out before that. But listen, if he's on the board at 7, and I'm of the belief like you, I don't think he's going to be on the board at 7. So I think it's it's a moot point. I think he's going to be off the board in the top 3 picks. I really do. I just think that's what's going to happen in this class with the teams that are picking in those areas. I think I'm not sold that Tennessee's definitely trying to trade out, or if they do, I don't think they're going to want to go much further. And I'm absolutely sold that the Giants and the Browns are both going to be looking for quarterbacks. So but if he's on the board at 7, he's absolutely in the conversation for me. In an ideal situation, I think that Shedeur Sanders is more system than he is. More, you would want the pieces around built to slide Shedeur Sanders in, and I think he could, functionally manage an offense really good. Like, there is the baggage and there is all that stuff that comes along with being Deion's son. I don't know if I believe most of the, some of the things about his brash or his attitude or something like that. I think a lot of that could just be, people have prejudged or set expectations on what they think Shedeur Sanders is based on the brashness of his dad. But the Shedeur Sanders, a player, I'll say, he doesn't come without faults. All these quarterbacks in this class have their own. But there's probably no better processor of the game than in the quarterback class this year than Shedeur Sanders. He's going to be able to understand what he's looking at pre-snap. He's going to be able to adjust through it post-snap, not get phased, get through his progressions, use the middle of the field, throw his wide receivers open, throw with accuracy.
Yes.
He throws NFL, receivers that are NFL open. He can hit those tight windows. He doesn't drive the ball or have the arm strength of some of the other guys in the class. But I think he's got enough arm strength. I consider him, again, getting back to the comp thing. Like, to me, I think he's a Chad Pennington, a very cerebral quarterback that in the right scheme or in the right system can really benefit you. And we'll have those moments where he flashes, but more so, if you need him, if you need to, hitch the wagon to the back of his shoulder pads and let him carry you across the finish line, he's not the guy that I would choose right from the get-go. He's more, a
facilitator, kind of.
A facilitator, more of a game manager to start, where I think with upside.
So maybe like an Andy Dalton type, like that. Is that something he reminds you of? Like that guy who isn't going to be, like you mentioned, the pure game changer, because he has like solid athletic traits. Like, he's a good athlete. He's not an insane, like he's one, like you mentioned, he's that facilitator who nothing really jumps off the chart to you when you look at him. Like, he doesn't have insane athleticism.
His athletic profile isn't great. I mean, it's fair. It's fair.
It's okay.
Yeah, and his arm strength is average to, at times above average. Like, he can make every throw. It's not that he can't. I think he's got a much better arm than Chad had. But I think the way he plays the game, I think the way he leads an offense, I think the moxie that he plays with, the toughness that he plays with, the not afraid to stand in the face of pressure and deliver a ball. He gets knocked a lot for, kind of, walking himself or scrambling himself into sacks. And I think a lot of that, not to say it didn't happen, it's on film, but I think some of it gets a little overblown because you got to take into context how, the level of offensive line play wasn't great. There was no running game there in Colorado. So, at times I'm sure he felt like he had to try to make something, but when you get a guy that throws for 40 some odd touchdowns and 7 interceptions and has a career, doesn't put the ball in harm's way, doesn't turn it over, really low, turnover ratio in terms of interceptions to passes thrown. That I think is a baseline that I would want to work with. So if he's at 7, he's absolutely in the conversation for me.
Appreciate you all tuning in. Smash the like. Make sure you are subscribed to the channel. Dom and Connor here with you on a Friday edition of NY Flight Jets Talk. Follow Dom if you haven't already at DC_NY Jets. I can't thank you guys enough for tuning in here on this Friday evening. Dom, appreciate you sparing some time. Appreciate you hopping on with us. As always, you got any final thoughts?
No, listen, we're less than a week away from the start of the tampering period and free agency. So for the Jets, I think I'm excited to see the direction that the Jets and our new regime, Darren Muji, really kind of leads us. I don't expect us to be big players at the top of the free agency market, but I also don't think that you're going to see the the true early bottom of the barrel kind of signings that Joe Douglas did year one, the Gerard Davises of the world, and so on and so forth. I hope that when we have a lot of money now, and there's more to come because there's still other, I think 19 million that'll come off the books with Aaron Rodgers, and that we can't spend it until June 2nd, but that'll pay for our draft class and then probably give you that cushion that you want to go into the regular season with. So I think there's going to be a lot of interesting ways that we can go, just because the roster is void of a lot of depth. So I'm expecting a big push. I'm expecting 1 or 2, not at the top signings, but kind of bigger names. And if I had to guess, it probably on the defensive side of the ball, maybe 1-on-1. I think that Steve Wilkes and Aaron Glenn are going to want to bring in a veteran safety to kind of captain the back of their defense, and
like a Justin Reed.
Yeah. Whether it's a Chin or a Trevon Moehrig or a Justin Reed or something along those lines, that I think those are all names that would make sense, and then maybe like a second tier, third tier wide receiver like a Darius Slayton or a Josh Palmer or something like that. Like those are guys that I think can step in and obviously really help. But yeah, I'm excited to get free agency going, and then once that happens, and you start to fill some of these holes, you can then reassess and see what would make sense draft wise, right?
Dom, appreciate you hopping on with us as always. Like I said, can't thank you guys enough for tuning in here on this Friday evening. Hope you guys have a great rest of your night. For Dom, I'm Connor signing off. JETS, 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 Jets.